UMass Amherst, I probably spend about 10% of my time working on assistive technology and 90% on accessibility. So I'm here with co-presenting with two wonderful people from UMass Amherst as well to talk to you about an exploration, a project that we're working on at UMass Amherst that has really great implications for other universities, for our university, of course, and it's really focused on students and student programmers, which is unique and also incredible. So we're going to talk a lot about the process. We're going to talk about why we got to where we are, why we're doing this. And it's been an interprofessional collaboration. We're working among different sections of our university to bring us all together to say we all have a common need, and our students and our staff and our faculty and our community have a common need. And how can we work together to bring it to fruition, what we're hoping to do. So I'm co-presenting with?
I'm Gail Parslow, and I am a software engineer at UMass Amherst in the IT department.
And I'm Nils LaCour. I'm in campus planning, a senior physical planner. So in addition to helping facilitate the campus master plan and many other planning efforts on campus, probably what I spend most of my time doing on a daily basis is making maps and doing working with geographic information systems and computer mapping.
So one thing I do want to stress is that this is a program in the works. This is a project we are currently working on. It is by no means finished, but we have funding and we have support, lots of support, and we have incredible student programmers. So you're going to learn a lot about that. And I think it's all you. Do you want this mouse?
Yeah, that's right. You can.
Okay.
Are you just going to say next slide?
Next
yeah.
slide.
Okay.
So as a historian first, before I was a planner, I always like to take a step back and frame this conversation with some background information on sort of how we got here. So next slide. And when I started preparing for this presentation, I had always thought that we had had a lawsuit that had triggered our efforts to mitigate accessibility issues on campus. So I went to one of our architects in design and construction management to find out more about the lawsuit and everything. She fortunately informed me that that was an urban myth, that actually there had been no lawsuit. It was a simple statement by a student that got recognized for what it was. What good does it do for me to know about an accessible restroom when I can't get into the building or onto the floor where it is? I mean, that simple statement of need was kind of what really woke people up and got them moving and motivated. So next slide. So I've got two maps in front of you here. One on the left is basically sort of what was the situation in 1994 on campus, where you have red buildings or pink, as you may or may not see them, and I now recognize that this is probably totally inappropriate colors to use on the map after being here for today, which has been a good part of the process. But a lot of the red and pink were our inaccessible buildings where you can't even get in the door. And then they go to the orange buildings where you could get through the door, but you couldn't get to all the floors, or the yellow buildings where you could get into the building, maybe not all doors, but you could get into the building and you could get all the floors. And then blue buildings are fully accessible. So you can get in every door, go to every floor, and they're fully accessible. And so you can see on the 1994 map to the left, there are a lot of pink or red buildings on campus. And so that prompted me to think about things, and I went back and I realized, oh, the American with Disabilities Act didn't actually pass until 1990 and wasn't in enforcement until 1992. Well, that suddenly explains the one blue building on the map that was built in 1991 was finally our first fully accessible building. The Mullins Center, which is our big arena to the far left there, was built in 1993. And then the Conti building up to the north, the blue building there, was built in 1995. So, boy, suddenly the American with Disabilities Act had a big impact on our campus. Well, now we go to the map to the right, which is basically the situation on 2012. And now you can see a lot more blue buildings that are fully accessible, and most of those were all constructed since obviously the mid-90s. But now there are really only a handful of pink buildings on campus. And so next slide. So now here I've got two maps again. The one on the left, again, is not very visually readable, but there's a lot of little asterisks that represent the hundreds of accessibility projects that we have undertaken over the last few decades. A lot of doors, a lot of elevators, a lot of bathroom retrofits and things like that. So all of those dots represent basically tens of millions of dollars of investment over the last 3 decades to make our buildings more accessible. And while, again, they're not the blue buildings that have been built since, more of them are blue now. And what you can see on the far right is the situation in 2016, where we do have a lot more blue buildings and mostly a lot of yellow buildings and even fewer red buildings on campus. So it represents coming a long way over a long period of time of real sustained effort. And just I threw in some, besides the hundreds of projects that cost tens of millions of dollars, it was interesting to see, looking back at my maps and seeing how all of the handicap sparse parking spaces changed over time. In 1999, we had only 144 spaces on campus. By 2012, we had 266, and now just in the last 4 years, we've added a bunch more, and we have 315. But they've also now migrated to much closer, much more logical places to put them. And that was sort of one of the interesting things about going through this process, was really to see that migration of places from just being stuck here and there to being much more logical and having much more thought.
Can I jump in for a second?
Oh, sure.
This was one of the first things I saw from Neil when we first met, and I dragged him into this world of loveliness. He came willingly. But this was so wonderful for me because I do have a visual preference for learning. It's helpful for me to synthesize information in such a way. So I was trying to grasp, when I got to UMass Amherst 2 years ago, get my head around our campus as a whole. It's massive. And this was so helpful, and I think it really speaks to what you said initially, is that we're always constantly learning, and accessibility is a constant learning experience for many reasons, and don't anyone tell you otherwise. It is. And I think this is a great way to see that Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was built. It takes time. So that's what this is. It's time and it's effort, and it's not giving up.
Thanks. So those maps ended up getting turned into first a brochure. So this was a fold-up brochure that was available in our disabilities access office. And it basically had those maps that you saw on the back side of it, but then also a table with each of the buildings, all the accessible restrooms within each of the buildings. And then a few of the more public buildings like the Student Union, the Fine Arts Center, and a couple others were then had floor plans included so that you could find your way around them. And they had, again, there's a lot of information on these maps, like what is the entrance accessibility? Can you access all floors? Can you accept some floor? And do you have a key card or not? Or so there was quite a bit of information on here, as well as then what types of accessible restrooms were they? Were they gender neutral, men's, women's, or men's and women's? And then in the table, you could see whether they're left-hand transfer, right-hand transfer, and information like that. Okay, next slide. So, of course, a paper map is very helpful, and I'm kind of an analog guy, even though I do all this computer mapping. I love paper maps, but of course, you really want to put this online and make it even more accessible. So we ended up using ArcGIS Online to create a online version of the map. So it's very similar to the maps that you saw, contain a lot of the same information, but now because it's online, you can just click on a building and then get access to all the tables of all the accessible restrooms in that building. You can get other information about buildings and things like that. Next slide. You can click on, we included now information about special transportation services and all of their pickup locations. I think we even could attach to pictures so you could see where those sites are. Or if we haven't done that, I know that's one thing we're going to do. We also tried to monitor construction fences on campus, because certainly over the last decade, we have been a constant construction zone, in which very few campuses have already a major roadblock in the middle of the campus, our campus pond. And then we did the campus dike. Now suddenly you had to go north of the campus center or south of Fine Arts Center. And that's, over 700 feet of campus that you can't go through. So, the impact of construction fences were a lot. We're trying to keep track of those. And then we wanted to create bookmarks. So on the typically used buildings, you could click on, it would zoom you, one of those icons for the buildings, you could zoom you into the building and you could find out more about the building. Again, all its accessibilities. And then we tried to set up some basic queries. Find this building by name, find an accessible men's toilet, women's toilet, and things like that. So this was all pretty good. No, that's fine. Just keep going. So I'm going to conclude my portion by talking a little bit about some of the next steps and some of the new technologies that we're using. So one of the things, especially with all the building boom that we've been experiencing over the last decade, is things change a lot, and trying to keep our maps up to date has been a real challenge. So we've been using unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones, to fly the campus the last couple of times, including 2016 as well as 2018. And one of the wonderful sort of side products that you get out of just the aerial imagery is you get a point cloud, which gives you sort of a center point, an XYZ center point of each image. And that way you can actually build a digital terrain model out of that. And so, next slide. So one of the things we really want to do now is we're experimenting with, can we use that point cloud? Because we haven't done LiDAR on campus since 2009. And with all the changes on campus, we were trying to figure out how we could get a digital terrain model where we could do some slope analysis on all of our sidewalks, so that we can now start mapping out accessible routes. So are those parking spaces really in the right spot, to give you an accessible route to the building and things like that. So that's some of the stuff we're doing in terms of, trying to find out, on our pedestrian network. And then of course, I really am looking forward to taking it to the next step, being able to connect that outdoor circulation network with the indoor circulation networks. Because, for instance, when we built on our campus, we have over 300 feet elevation difference between the athletic fields down on the bottom of the valley to the dorms up on the top of the valley. So that's quite a bit of elevation change. And so when we put in the Commonwealth Honors College in 2013, that was sort of taking you from those athletic fields up to the first plateau. And we changed the way we provided access to the buildings, so that you could actually get into the buildings and use the elevators within the buildings to get you up to the next level. And so that's one of the really cool things that we were doing. So now I'm going to turn it over.
Niels is like a little bucket of historical information. And this is so critical to something like my crazy ideas or disability services crazy ideas of, let's make an app. None of this would be possible. Whether or not his current technology that he's using is accessible is kind of doesn't matter in this situation, because we have the historical data we need to build the app that we need to make. We wouldn't have had that information unless they had documented it. So we have that info, and we have Gail, who you'll meet in a minute, who's really able to push this forward in a way that we don't have to go back and collect all of that now, because it exists already. So we found ourselves in a small room in the W.E.B. Du Bois Library, where I met Niels for the first time. Gail was not yet a part of our group. Disability Services was there. We had a faculty member at that point. We had someone else. There's a group of us, and we were all talking about, we all have a problem, and what it comes down to is it all affects the same population in the end. They were trying to figure out how can they being facilities campus planning, was trying to figure out how do we best measure slope changes efficiently and effectively to get things changed on our campus faster. And then I was there like, how do I make sure that my students aren't falling into holes or walking into fences, or walking into construction zones that are really dangerous, or baseball games, or whatever. And then we had disability services saying this is a risk, like help. And the faculty member who at that time was using a scooter was just saying, you know, this is really inconvenient. And so we wanted to fix all of it, and we wanted to fix it for our students, our staff, and our faculty, but also our campus visitors who have no idea what to expect necessarily until they arrive. And so we're sitting in this room talking about it, and I said, hey, you know, has anyone heard of Waze? And has anyone heard of Waze? Yeah, okay. So Waze is, in case you haven't, a navigation app. It is not accessible, but that doesn't matter because we're not doing anything with Waze. But we're kind of using the idea of Waze to begin the process of an app that's going to collect information that will benefit all of these stakeholders at the table. The idea is that we will have real-time reporting for students, for staff, for faculty walking around campus. Whenever someone walks into some sort of barrier, comes across something, they can immediately report it in the app. It will pop up, so someone in transit will know it's there, or a pre-planned route will tell you that that's there and reroute you in another way. Again, if we didn't have all of that information from Niels' team, we wouldn't have anything to work off of, and we'd be starting from scratch in that way. So this is really collaborative, and it's important. So we're sitting there, we're talking about Waze, we're kind of throwing all these ideas out, and then it started. And it, just because things have to start, and our purpose was really, they just start somewhere, was access. So we wanted to develop this outdoor navigation wayfinding app. Not indoor. I will make that very clear. That's a whole other bird, whole other ball game. There's another group on our campus who's focusing on indoor navigation. There's other people focusing on indoor navigation. However, eventually the hope is that they integrate. We're trying to get people to the door, which is really hard to do right now with current technology and accessibility, but that's the goal. We need to ensure that the app is accessible to all types of users, not just people who are blind or low vision, but individuals who use different assistive technologies like switch access, people who are in wheelchairs. We wanted to make sure the app is accessible and the routes they plan are accessible. We want it to be able to be controlled by text to speech, or speech to text as well. So there's all of these little things that we're thinking about because we're trying to address a wide array of people. And we also want it to focus on crowdsourcing because people walk our campus constantly. So we want this to integrate with what people have in their pocket. We want it to be quick, we want it to be easy, and we want people to report stuff. Think Waze, there it is. So we had this collaboration. Right now it consists of the Assistive Technology Center, which is myself and Josh Pearson, and Hannah, our lovely intern who's sitting in the back over there. Campus Planning and Facilities, which is Niels. We have a whole slew of other people that Niels is here representing today. Disability Services, Anne-Marie Duchamp is around if you haven't had a chance to say hello to her. And then IT, Matthew Mattingly and Gail. Gail has been an integral part of this, especially at the point we're at right now, which is where our student dev team is going to begin hitting the ground running in the fall. And our student dev team, did I talk about? Okay, yeah, our student dev team. So we found these amazing people through something we have called Hack UMass. So one of the ideas that Marty, who works in facilities and campus planning, said, hey, why don't we propose this as a project at Hack UMass, where students get together from all over the country. And we wanted a UMass-specific team. That was one of our goals, and we wanted them to be students, hopefully with at least 2 years left. So we had time. And so we proposed the project, went through all of that, wrote up the proposal. We got funding from our Architectural Access Board. And we said, for $10,000, we want however many students to come up with a prototype, pitch it to us, and do it well, and we'll move forward from there. And after all of that, we found a team of 4 people, Bill, Kiers, Jason, and Jack. Kers? I don't know how to say his name. Kiers? Okay, just want to make sure. And so they're wonderful. We've been through incredible amounts of planning with them. We meet regularly, monthly. They have gone through accessibility training, accessibility testing. They needed to learn how to test what they developed in every stage of the process. They've gone through that training, and they'll continue to do so. They went through GIS training to learn about that and all of the information that Niels and his team have, because they'll need to integrate all of that. They put on presentations for us to ensure that we knew what technology and choices they were going to be making in their development. And then Gail really came in, and she's in the process of working with them to design with accessibility in mind throughout the entire process. And now it becomes Josh and myself sitting there to say, hey, let's remember, we have to test every single time you do something. Hey. So our team is incredible. We meet in this fashion every month, just to get updates on the status of the project, and to learn more about where they're going and what their challenges are. And the whole idea is that this will be open source, because when they graduate, we want students to come in to continue this project. So in terms of our progress so far, we started this in April of 2017, which is kind of crazy. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was built. I keep telling myself that, and I will in the future, because it's true. It took time. Our stakeholders, we got all of those people to the table, and consistently. We conceptualized this, went through the Hack UMass project. We got funding from our Architectural Access Board, that's AAB. Developed the project, found our students, developed a resource folder in Box. I'm not going to open that up, but we awarded the prize to those students. They decided to get hired by UMass to continue the project. So we did that. They went through an incredible amount of training, and this past January, well, really it was November to January, they went through training. And right now, they're continuing to get support around GIS, or GIS mapping information around accessibility. They've been all set up in Jira and Bitbucket to really be able to get their code in a place where they can all access it and to know where they are in their projects and their development. And that was through Gail, and she'll talk about that in a little bit. We started to get together all of our ideas around who's responsible for what are our roles, and then they really started getting everything together in Jira, so that in the fall when they returned, they all left us for internships for the summer, which is great. And of course, my first question was, when you get to your internship, what are you going to ask them? Is this accessible? Probably not, but it's fine. Anyway, so there's a protocol for accessibility testing around mobile that will be integrated into what they're doing as they go along, or they're checking with themselves in every stage of their development process. And in May, we had our final meeting with them where we went over, what do you need to develop this? And then I went and sat with the Architectural Access Board and did a presentation and said, we need $50,000. And they said, okay. So we have funding for this next year to pay our developers and to continue developing this project, which is important, so important. So we're going to get as much as we can out of it and squeeze as much as we can in this next year to build this prototype, to have something in the spring to start with. So I'm going to hand it over to Gail, but if you can't tell, I'm really excited about it. So it's good. It's good.
So I'm also very excited about this, and thank you for the chance to work on this project.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So as Kelsey mentioned, I'm running 2 trainings for the student programmers. And the first one is called Software Developer Tools. And the second one is called Coding for Accessibility. And the Software Developer Tools, Kelsey mentioned it a bit. I'll mention it in a bit more detail. It's mainly about how do you keep your code organized, and how do you code in a team and not mess up other people's code. That's the main purpose. And the tools we're using for that, Kelsey mentioned a few of those, Git, SourceTree, Bitbucket, and Jira. So SourceTree is the program to access Git, and Git's the tool that does the version control. And basically what it does, it creates a container for say you have a project of all code and files. It creates a container, that's called a repository, and it keeps track of all your files and all the changes to your files. It's the most widely used version control in the whole world, and I highly recommend it if you're on a programming team. So Jira is the issue tracking system that we're using. It's also built for programmers. It's really helpful in terms of breaking down a project into discrete chunks. So for example, one chunk could be correct the alt text on the homepage images. So you'd create a ticket for that, and that one little chunk you can manage in a whole bunch of different ways and keep really good track of it.
I just love adding people.
Yeah.
Like at this person, hi.
Yeah. You can comment on
Still
it. You can
here.
keep a commented thread, and
Yeah.
once you're done with your portion, you can send it to somebody else to do something.
I am not a programmer, but I find this stuff fun.
Yeah, this is good for if you're managing a programming
People, yeah.
project. It's easy to use, and it's awesome. I give it 5 stars. If you're not happy with your issue tracking system, check this out. It's really good. That is a really good question. So I have been working with Josh Pearson on accessibility, and he has found portions of it to be accessible and portions of it to be not accessible. And we've had a hard time, actually. We've contacted Atlassian in several instances, and they haven't been extremely responsive. I put in tickets saying one of the people on our team cannot do this or that, and they say blah, 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 and we don't get a really great response. But we have found that Josh is able to use it, enough of it, that it's acceptable to us right now. So, good question.
However, this is really good. I didn't know this. And so
Okay.
my favorite thing is to find a vendor and have it out with them. So I don't mind having that conversation as well.
We would love to, because Atlassian is a huge company and they make awesome products. We would love for their products to be, they're pretty close to being really accessible, but there's definitely stuff that Josh would need to make it fully accessible.
So this is great. I was unaware of this, but yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, keep going. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can talk to you later about our efforts in that way.
About what?
Our efforts with Jira and
really?
competitor, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Another Atlassian product we use is Bitbucket, and that is a repository management system. So I just mentioned that Git makes a repository, which is a container that keeps track of all your files. Bitbucket gives you certain tools to do some management on your repository. Certain things we do, say for example, you had code that you had already tested and you knew it was really stable code. Maybe you're going to put that in a branch and you don't want your developers developing on that branch because you know that's stable. So you could protect that code with permissions, and so that your developers couldn't write to it. Maybe just your code reviewer could write to that branch. Another awesome feature, and the reason I begged our team to get Bitbucket was because we can do pull requests, which is really great for the student development team. I'll talk about pull requests later, but I'm rabidly in love with pull requests, and Bitbucket's awesome.
She's a programmer. I love it.
So there's a picture of a playground here, and I put that there because Jira and Bitbucket play really well together. They're just well integrated, and we use the feature branch workflow with these two tools. And so I was just talking about code, and in Git, you can keep a branch of code that we've already tested and it's stable, and sometimes you might label that the master branch. And then if a developer comes in, they can make a copy at any point of that and then do their own work, which keeps them separated and keeps them out of trouble off the branch that you've already tested. So the way that the feature branch workflow works is that the developer would open up Jira and you'd click on a button that says create a new branch. And so that for each task, maybe the alt image task, they would create a new branch for that, and they would be working completely separately from the already tested code. Once they're done, they create a pull request, probably in Bitbucket, and the pull request is basically saying, hey, I'm finished, can you look at my code? And then a reviewer could check it over in Bitbucket, and if everything's looking great, they can merge it into the stable branch. So pull requests are awesome. They really are. If you have just a team and you're looking for doing some extremely simple, light code review, it's really easy to use. I love this tool. It's also really great for collaboration on code. So that's kind of the end of what I'm going to talk about in terms of the tools we've been using to organize the code. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the motivation towards the next training, which was the Coding for Accessibility training. And Kelsey talked about it, and I'll just reiterate some of what she said. So the app is to help make the campus more accessible to people, but itself, it has to be accessible. And one problem is that student programmers are not taught how to write accessible code. I went through 4 years of the computer science program at UMass Amherst. 0 minutes was spent during all of that time even mentioning accessibility. I never saw it in any textbook. No instructor mentioned it. I talked to the dev team that Kelsey hired, the students here, And the same thing, they have had not even one mention of any accessibility. Sue, I think you mentioned that in John's presentation this morning. So yeah, and so that's a problem, I'm guessing.
Isn't that messed up?
Yeah, it is.
So messed up.
Doing a disservice to society.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Can you talk to Amherst about that?
Yes. Yes, that will be a conversation. Our computer science program is going to hear a lot about this because we're hoping to not have to ask the Architectural Access Board for funding going forward, because we want it to be a part of the computer science program. So that's my next venture into this project, is that I'm kind of moving away from this part of it, and Gail is starting to go over it and to build this with the students, and I'll be switching gears to kind of how can we make it sustainable. And that's exactly how, is a conversation with computer science and having this be built into their curriculum in some way.
I have a way to excite students about accessibility that I can tell you.
I'd love to hear about it, definitely. And just so you know, this is not a knock on UMass Amherst or UMass Lowell. This is across our country. This is a huge problem because industries and technologies the industries are saying, where are these people? We need people who can do this. Did you have a question?
I spent 8 years in college as a degree. I never hear about accessibility until I got to my
Right. And where did you go? Where was this?
Puerto Rico.
Oh, right. So
This is worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I suspect it's a worldwide problem, not just in the United States. Yeah.
It is.
Yep.
Then I get my current.
So we're going to change that.
Yes. Right now, right here in this session.
This is the slide I feared for John, because John in his talk this morning said, well, he told me earlier that John mentioned that in his talk that if you integrate accessibility, and he was specifically talking about web programming, web accessibility, early in your project, it's much simpler than just finishing your project. You were delivering tomorrow. Somebody quick, check this out for accessibility. So you want to, of course, have that integration. And I put this slide here because I came into this maybe 2 years ago into projects that we're working on apps for the National Park Service, and Matthew is my supervisor on those projects. And we're tasked with having them be 508 compliant. So I came into it not knowing at all how to make apps accessible, but knowing some web accessibility. And I agree that knowing that to make web pages accessible is much easier, and especially if you start early in the project. So, I found the learning curve for moving from web accessibility to being able to create mobile apps that are accessible to be very steep, in that there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lack of tutorials. Just last week, I sent something to the Department of Homeland Security because their testing procedure was inaccurate, and they're going through a revision. So she was thrilled to get that information. So it's challenging. It's really challenging to make mobile apps accessible. So that's the motivation for the Coding for Accessibility training that we're running, and it's basically a series of workshops that we're doing. We've done a couple. I've done 2 or 3 already, and then we'll run some more in the fall, as Kelsey mentioned. So I've got a slide that lists some of the topics that we're working on. But I'm not going to go through each one. If you're interested in the topics, search the web, contact us if you want some more information. But I won't go through them. I'll just list some. But what I did want to say is that the most important principle that overrides all of the workshops that we're doing with the students is that whether you're creating a web page, whether you're creating a desktop application or a mobile app, you should know that if you want that to be accessible to somebody who's using an assistive technology such as a Switch or a screen reader, thank you, Kelsey, then there are certain bits of information that you have to give, and you have to give that information in a certain way. And that's all of what these workshops are about. What information does the assistive technology need, and how do you give that? Usually you give it through an accessibility API, which takes some information from your app and then passes that on in a certain way to the assistive technology. So that's the main thing. We talk about semantics, we talk about ARIA, and how to test your code, we talk about how to document your testing, and accessibility APIs, which I just mentioned. And then we talk about some of the guidelines and standards, like WCAG 2.0 and 201, sorry.
No.
Yeah, I'm like way
Now
behind here.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, 2.1.
What'd you say, John?
2.1.
2.1. Oh, I'm so bad. And
No,
508
you're
has an update as well, so I'm glad I didn't put which version I'm using. But one of the most helpful things as a fairly person who's fairly new to making mobile apps accessible is the Department of Homeland Security's mobile app testing procedures. They are really detail oriented. They will say, at this step, here's what we're going to test, turn on the screen reader, here are the settings for the screen reader, here's how to walk through your app, here's connect a Bluetooth keyboard, here's the key to press, try this, and it's really specific. So if you have a team or someone, or you're trying to learn how to do it, I recommend looking at some of those. They have one for iOS, they have one for Android, they have one for mobile applications, they have some for desktop applications. It's really helpful. They're going to be revised fairly soon. I think the new versions will be released in the fall, so you may want to just wait for those, but they're very, very helpful.
Do you have assistive technology users coming with apps that are very accessible? Like, can you give a good example?
I have Josh Pearson
Josh
is my main source. I
Yeah.
beg him. I say, please send me some apps that are really helpful, and show me how you walk through them, because I really am sincerely trying to learn screen readers. I need to learn one for Android. I need to learn one for iOS. It's tricky for me. It's hard because I don't use them every day. And if I'm running through a test for the Department of Homeland Security's testing procedure or something, is the mistake because I'm not using the screen reader right? Or is it because I misread the instructions? Because I'm just not an expert screen reader user. So, sorry, what was your question?
So do you have like switch users come in?
Okay, so that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's was the really important part for what Josh and I were doing from the initial testing, or the initial workshop with the students on accessibility testing. We have all of that technology, switch access, eye gaze, all of it at our disposal in our assistive tech center. So I taught them about switch access, and we only have one switch user on campus, but they are not frequently on our campus for health reasons. So we will probably not necessarily bring in a native switch user, but we have people who are decent users of switches who are there to help them. Josh is a native screen reader user, so that's been incredibly helpful, and he is able to toggle between all different types. And then we have other students on campus who will be testing this alongside us, and other employees as we move through that are a part of the education department. So it's really a full-blown effort, especially as it gets developed.
And if you know anyone who would like to volunteer their help, we would love to have
Especially
anybody else on a team.
Especially students, just because this is an incredible project for them to understand. And I'll talk a little bit about that again after. I'm not looking necessarily for I really want students to be engaged, because those are the people who are leaving our campuses who need to fight for this every day. So if you know people, students, who are really interested in learning more because, again, they're not getting this education, please send them our way.
And I'd like to add to that. So I'm so thrilled that we're working with students, and
Yes,
they're going to move into the
yes.
world and spread this. But I also want to say that it's really important that staff who are staying around have this expertise as well. So I would like to encourage that we, that we make, that encourage other people who aren't just students.
Yes, yeah. I think the target for this in terms of funding is students.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that our students have access to this.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
They don't have it in their program, and then often when they leave, they have no idea to ask about it.
Yeah. So just as a final word on my part, I just wanted to give a plug for the Google's Web Accessibility course. And John, I mentioned this in your program this morning. I found it really helpful. It's meant for programmers, but non-programmers would benefit from it as well. It's really awesome. It has people who are native users of assistive technology with a lot of videos, and it starts from basic principles, and it goes into coding examples, which if you're not a programmer, you could skip over easily, but really gain a lot of information from. So I find that a really helpful course. It's in udacity.com, which is an online course system. It's free, and I love it.
What's it called?
The site is Udacity, UDA City, CITY.com. And you have to register, but once you're in, you can just search for that course, and it's awesome. Right.
So I think the narrative through all of this is that collaboration is key. You can't go it alone. You won't get anywhere. I had one of the programmers say to me, the student programmers say recently, man, I didn't realize like how much it takes and how many people it takes. And this is their first experience being paid in the real world, quote unquote, to do something. And this is probably an experience unlike any other for them. And they were juniors last year when they started with us. They'll be seniors next year. This will be an incredibly unique opportunity. And I'm hoping that they'll be kind of forever changed as programmers after leaving it. They have amazing expertise working with them from all different areas. And that's the big part of it too, is you can't do this by yourself, none of it. You have to bring in all of the different pieces or else you're going to get nowhere fast. And so even though it's been a year and it feels like, and they said, wow, this is really long. I'm like, but look how far you've come. We had to go back and see like every single stage has a purpose. And it's going to take time. And so now in the fall, we've gotten to the point, we've got our funding, we're ordering all of our testing equipment, development equipment, so that it will be in their hands when they hit the ground, starting classes in the fall, and they'll start right away. So there's hopefully the fall they'll begin more work with Gail, or continue work with Gail, begin coding, and then they're going to be hired full-time during the month break to do code sprints during that time to really bolster this. And then this is where your question about computer science, can you talk to them? That general ongoing that's my personal next step with this project, is to push that forward, to make it sustainable and make it an experience that's campus-wide, but housed with computer science, because right now it does not exist, but it should. So there's some links here about accessibility in maps. Some resources that came out of our map, our accessibility in maps training for our students. What they first went through was the first training that they did. There's some articles here, so if you have access to this presentation through the retreat website, definitely take a peek at the links, explore them. They're articles. Some of them are more specific to programming. So it has things like outdoor GPS apps, how to map for the blind. But I do also, I'm the constant voice in saying, no, it's okay, in saying this is not just about people who are blind or low vision. We have a wide array of students on our campus. This is also about people with physical mobility needs, people who use speech to control their environment. So we are testing for everything. If it's in their pocket and it's an accessibility that they hold on their phone, we're testing it. Zoom features, all of it. Otherwise, it's not going to be useful to the population, which is everyone we're trying to target. Yes?
There's also an app called Get There.
Yes.
It's not on
this list. No, I picked
for,
5.
It's for Android, but I know that the guy who did it, I think he's working on maybe doing it for
Okay, cool.
Apple, but I'm not sure. It's really good.
Okay.
It's simple.
Yeah.
So if somebody has trouble with technology, it's not that hard, like Blind Square.
Yeah. Yep. Wicked complicated. And I hope that they make it for iOS, because most of our students on our campus are iOS users, the individuals who are blind or low vision. We actually don't, so that would be, yes, exactly. So that's the hope. We definitely have a preference on our campus in terms of students for iOS when it comes to this type of stuff. And then just some considerations. There's a list here. I'm not going to read all of these out. But I will talk about the last one really briefly. The last 50 feet, a lot of these mapping technologies will get you within 50 feet of a door, but that's not exactly super helpful when you arrive about 50 feet in the door and they're like, all right, there you go. And you're like, all right. So the goal is really to make it better. We want to get people to the door. Or like what Niels was saying before, even our SpecTran, our special transportation, we want to make sure that people know where that bus is going to be or where that van is going to be, so they can actually get there independently. So all of that information that he's aggregated over years is so critical to the development of this particular app, because it's data that we have. So that's really awesome. And do you guys have your contact info? You didn't put your contact info. Okay, well, this is our contact info. But please reach out to us if you would. We can transfer you to Gail and to Niels. But the Assistive Technology Center, this is our contact info. So certainly take a picture or access it through the slides on the retreat website. Join us on social media. We do post a lot of information about everything, like anything and everything. But definitely this project as it moves along, we want people to know about it. And then listen to our podcast. I'll plug it every chance I get. Right. So that's our project. Questions, thoughts, feelings.
Is there anything that you've done that you think could be applied to other campuses? It seems like very specific, like your buildings are not the same as our buildings in Boston. So, because we are, basically what we did for our map is we took Google Maps and made little icons on top of them. Your websites, that environment is changing, we have to upgrade to something else.
Yes.
Is there any like behind the scenes coding that can be applied, or is it pretty much any campus has to start from scratch?
So that was the hope, is that we can provide it as open source information to people, for people to edit to make sense of their own campus. Obviously I can't at UMass Amherst program for UMass Boston because it's a totally different school versus a small private school that's got 5 buildings versus, so you're gonna have to do some coding on your own. But the idea is that you have a framework to work from. Also, what I love about what Gail is doing, she's trying to organize it in such a way that one of the banes of my existence is working with vendors who create code and struggle to make it accessible. And then I'm talking to another school and they say, this is totally inaccessible. And I'm like, well, why didn't you use that source code initially? So they're not copying the code, they're like redoing it and they're not talking to each other and it's a nightmare. So the hope is that we're building it and making it concrete for people, and that people aren't messing it up in that way. But I can't control or Gail can't control, or whoever, what your campus will need specifically.
So when this is all done, will there be a website that says, hey, programmers?
That would be the hope. I mean,
interesting.
All of it would be the hope, is that we'd be able to make it as available as possible. That was from the get-go. We wanted this to be open source, and we wanted people to have access and to do whatever they needed to do with it to make it reasonable for their school or whatever.
You got to keep it going because once they graduate, they'll
Yep.
be building or something.
Exactly. Yes. Which is also the importance of the integrating it with our computer science program, because that's how it will be sustainable, and that's how we give people the experience to understand the importance, so that maybe one day the other person on the line is going to be Bill, one of our students, and I can say, oh, you know what I'm talking about because we trained you. So that's the hope, is that it's just a part of it. Yes.
Is your intention then, as you're developing this software in open source, to then maybe create a guideline curriculum for accessibility software training for non-open source?
Well, Matthew, are you hearing that?
You know what I mean? Like hoping, like, oh, this
Yeah.
will be the pilot, and then of course you get all the credit for it. Is that your ultimate goal? Like say, okay, we can use this as our development course also for teaching accessibility software developers in a non-open source.
I would love to be involved in something
ultimate,
like that.
our ultimate goal is really the app, right? But that's absolutely a byproduct of the whole situation, is we want to make the information as clear and concrete and available to anyone we can as best as we can, and collaboratively. Not one person can own it. It has to be collaborative. Yeah.
And thanks I think it's a good idea you've seeded my idea to document things as I go along, to thinking about outside people, what might somebody else be interested in.
Yes. John.
Me. I have 3 questions.
Yeah.
Please feel free to give me a short answer. I apologize for asking this one, but how would your app help someone who's totally blind to navigate your campus?
Because we're hoping for, well, it depends on the situation, where they're trying to navigate to. But right now we're working with Josh specifically because he is using as either a cane user or a dog user. That's going to be the part too, is how we're going to provide turn-by-turn directions. But that's what we're hoping to integrate as well, so that he follows those directions, currently using Google Maps, but we're trying to integrate it specifically for our building to get from point A in a building to point B in a different building. Okay. So, yep.
That's one. The next one is, one of the things I've been asking every presentation is, are you considering people with cognitive disability? So for instance, a good example of this is that if someone with a cognitive disability is following your turn-by-turn directions and gets interrupted, how does that person get back following those directions? That kind of thing. not expecting that you're doing that already, but I'm just.
The developers themselves have been made aware of the different categories that we're trying to target. The only one that they brought up that we didn't bring up to them was speech, which is also incredibly important because we want to ensure that it's accessible in that regard as well. But we have talked about blind, low vision, deaf and hard of hearing, cognitive, and physical mobility. Those are the 4 categories we focused on.
Okay, so my third one is, hey, what do you think about not focusing on an app, but focusing on an API? Because if you provide these data that you were talking about and functionality via an API, people can create all kinds of apps that use that API, things that you've never even thought of. And so I suggest to you that you really think about an API because you could really offer that not only as a service for your campus, but that API architecture that you offer could then be used for other schools that have similar data. And it could really be, that would be a great way to federate your project across the country, across the world. And you wouldn't have to worry about the app market.
That's a great way to that's a great way to pitch it to the computer scientists too. Thank you
in the School of Computer Science.
Yeah.
That might be another phase of this project. Yeah. You know, how to abstract away and do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So is the base for this your GIS maps?
Yes.
That's what it is.
But
and
we can
they're not Google based.
No, that's our own mapping. But you know, we can turn that into any kind of format that they need.
I mean, ours now is based on. I mean, just our Maps app is not app. This program is based on Google, but they only update every 5 to 8 years. And we built here at UMass Lowell 7 buildings in 10 years. So, you know, what was a construction site before has like 3 buildings.
Right.
Yeah. In reality, zoomed in on them.
Yeah.
You look at the terrain map, you know, like what I'm driving by.
So one of the products that we use, software products that we use that is really integral in what we do is called the feature manipulation engine. It's made by Safe Software. It's an extract, transform, and load program. So you can take 300 to 400 different data types, manipulate them, turn them into 300 or 400. So that's allowed us. But you know, after being here today, I'm like, I got to go back and ask those guys because they're a fantastic company to work for, and they're always listening and doing so. You know, what are they thinking in terms of accessibility and things like that in the future? Because they're one of my favorite corporate cultures of any software company I've ever dealt with. So
sometimes it's just asking the question, being the first person to say something. And one of the other interesting components to this app is the data collection in the background on elevation. That was a huge part of this that we were talking about initially, was like, how can we target elevation areas of concern on our campus? So that
you're in a wheelchair.
Yes.
Going down a hill.
Exactly.
It's snowy.
Yes. Right.
At every point.
Yes.
Yeah,
and especially at our campus, you were talking about
it's
it's
icy and snowy. Maybe they get out and shovel 3 times.
Yeah.
Before class, but maybe not.
Right.
Twice.
So that's the hope too. It's just the beauty of this and the reason why I love it so much and why I love so many of the projects that I get to be a part of on our campus is the relationships that are built around it. And that's so important. And it really moves that information out to our campus. We've come a long way in like 2.5 years in terms of conversation, and it's been really awesome to see and be a part of.
Yeah, I love the real-time aspect with that Waze aspect.
Yes, exactly. Like watch out. Yeah.
Really
exactly. Yes.
But you can that hazard.
Yes.
And the other thing I talk about people getting interrupted in the middle of the app. We were on Waze yesterday and stopped at a farm. And then, you know, Waze says, you know, I've noticed you've stopped.
Yeah.
Are you in traffic?
Do you want to continue your route, or do you want to? Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no, we're not.
Yeah. It asks you checks. It checks in with you.
Yes, but I mean, you know, you could have a similar, you know, especially for a cognitive person.
My favorite is because I am incredibly forgetful. So I use, if this were to not be near me, my life would be over. My phone is so important to my everyday function. and I'm almost forgetting where I'm going with that now. Oh, so like what happens to me, I'm so serious, is I'll just I'm in the middle of using an app and I'll just close out of it. And I'm like, well, why did I just do that? And when you go back into Waze, it says, do you want to continue to blah, 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 blah. It's like, yes, I do. I don't know why I ever closed out of this. So yeah. I just sit there and just close things. So things like that are incredibly helpful. And it's a smart app. It's just not well designed entirely. So that's the hope, is that, and the component and being able to that cop isn't there anymore. Yeah. Yeah. So all really important things. But that was, and to give students the power to kind of talk about their campus and like what's there, what's happening, what's not happening. And also just for visitors, whether they have a physical learning, whatever difference or not, it's good to know when you step foot on UMass Amherst campus or any campus, what am I going to experience here? What's in my way?
Is it going to be tied into facilities or into?
That's the hope, was really the campus app that we have, is that it would be a part of that. So that it doesn't have to be like a separate entity.
I mean, so somebody reports a pothole in a sidewalk or a slippery spot that needs ice or that needs salt or.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are they going to respond? Like, who's going to respond?
Right. Well, that's a good question. Initially, what even sparked this, like a while ago, before our disability services, one of the co-interim directors said to me, have you talked to Niels? And I was like, no, who's that? But I was initially talking with Apple, and I was sitting at some desk with some provosts. I don't even remember who they were, but we were sitting there and we were having a conversation about this. And I think it was probably who's the guy for facilities?
Oh,
Shane. Yeah. So he was seated at a table with me, and I was like, what are we going to do about our students who are falling into holes or like don't know about, it's not okay. And he was unaware, just because I think he just wasn't aware. But he was super receptive, and he was like, well, we have a Twitter account or something, but it just, I think people in their workflow, they're just trying to get it done. And so it's just, we're trying to make it efficient for everybody so that someone can report it or see it. So someone who is working to fill in a hole or whatever can see that it's been reported and make it easy, and then to report it's not there.
No, but I mean, for your program, how's that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so there's a report on the app. Now, how is somebody sitting in the facilities office going to know that they can go about it?
Right, and that's the stuff, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're going to, like, theoretically they would know, but really, how are they going to know?
Right.
But
And that's,
kick an email?
no, I don't, I'm going to default to Gail for that one, because I'm not sure exactly how it will get communicated to
We do have an
facilities.
operations center within the physical plant that
Right,
receives
but
all
how
of that
will we
information.
know?
So that infrastructure
Yeah.
is set up, but they do need to get the
Yeah.
message.
Yeah, they're going to have
Like what the best
app is
way.
going to have to kick something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Matthew.
Matthew.
The answer to that question is there's an app that does that.
Perfect. There's an app for that.
Yeah.
That now is launched to the operations center.
Oh, perfect. Oh,
Operations
right.
center.
Yes.
You're
Right, yeah. You got to, but at some point, somebody's got to.
Did you guys develop that? Was that? I think.
What about that? API. And they have an API. You can do mashup.
You guys had already been having that conversation, so it was pulling it together. Okay. I totally forgot. Thank you.
So
Yes,
we
Matt.
talked a lot about direction, right? But is and so it's just, and I think coming up with directions is really the way to go. But I also think that like I'm also I can't see it all, but I'm still very visual learner.
Spatial,
I'm
all of
very
that.
spatial. I
Yeah,
like looking at maps and graphs.
absolutely.
So and I know that there's been a little bit of work done like 3D printing or things like that. So has Amherst set up with those types of technology?
So I can speak about 3D printing from the indoor perspective, not so much on the outdoor. I haven't been a part of it. If that does exist, I'm not sure. But what we've been focused on in terms of 3D printing is around our flex classrooms for tactile designs, like the typical designs you would experience in a classroom when you walk in. So that's one thing that we're working on, but we haven't done it for outdoors yet. There's someone at Mount Holyoke College who's doing 3D mapping. And actually there was a conversation at our retreat last year. I don't remember if it was Penn State or another university who's doing a lot with tactile mapping for outdoors. But UMass Amherst, as far as I am aware, is not focused on that currently. But indoor, yeah.
It's a dream of ours.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been lobbying for GIS to go 3D for decades. The whole software industry in GIS is moving that way. As a matter of fact, Esri is, pretty soon not going to support their typical 2D mapping. It's all going to be 3D and 2D integrated together. So we hope to get there. We certainly dream about it and would like to get there.
And we do have a really robust digital media lab on our campus with quite a few 3D printers, and we're leveraging that for a microbiology project. But that would be an interesting collaboration.
We were also very fortunate when we created our new design building, which was the largest wooden structure built in Northeast in the last 100 years. But the coolest part about that building for me, as an alum of the landscape architecture department, was the fact that we brought together 3 different programs from 3 different colleges. So we brought architecture together with landscape architecture and regional planning, along with building construction technology, and created the Center for the Built Environment. So there's a lot of wonderful things that are beginning to come out around putting all of those. I mean, again, talking about collaboration and the power of collaboration, there's a lot of wonderful things. And one of the big wonderful things that came out of it was that Trimble technology, they do a lot of surveying and stuff, and are really seeming like they're trying to position themselves to really revolutionize the world of the built environment. And they gave us a $4.5 million grant of all kinds of technology, both hardware and software, to really facilitate, again, those kinds of collaborations, which I think, Matt, to get to your point about creating that 3D world, we do have some large-scale 3D printers in that, and I know it's a matter of time before we really develop that. And we're starting to use a lot of those technologies, along with, we've just created UMass Air, which is hopefully going to help us create the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Center to try to do those things. But that's where I see some really good stuff coming in the future. But again, I really appreciated John's point earlier, is if you make it accessible, it makes it better for everybody.
Cost effective.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Another thing I saw is we always talk about parking spaces, and you could say all the handicap spaces in lot whatever are full, go over here. So that's just another thing for on the list.
No, absolutely. And there's so many of these features, and a lot of it will be as people use it, and it gets used over and over and over. When we get through our beta testing, all of that, so important to have these things pop up, and they will pop up because that's the nature of it. Okay, so I hope everyone's coming to closing. We have a raffle we're about to do. Thank you all for being here, for your questions. Reach out, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.